When plunging into the ocean, several feet deep, the diver's most formidable adversary is the ruthless, relentless pressure. With each descent of 33 feet, it grows by 1 atmosphere, delivering a crushing force of 14.6 pounds per square inch upon the body. And when combined with faulty, decaying equipment, the unyielding grasp of the ocean's surface, and a crew teetering on the edge of exhaustion, this can only become a recipe for an inevitable catastrophe. You're watching Into the Mist, and I am Martin Saunders, the man who clawed his way back from the brink of doom, right in the middle of the malevolent ocean where fate claimed everyone but me. It was October 26, 1983. I had just touched down on the Byford Dolphin, this infamous semi-submersible drilling rig, working out in the North Sea off Norway's coast. It was run by Dolphin Drilling Limited, a Fred Olsen Energy subsidiary, and it had a reputation for being pretty intense. My wife and I had just welcomed our second child when I took on a photography assignment for the Alexander Keelan platform, which was a job so risky the authorities wouldn't allow it. So instead of that, I ended up snagging a contract-based diving gig with the Byford Dolphin for some maintenance work, which I failed to recognize was equally treacherous. The paycheck, though, was tempting, averaging around $30,000 to $45,000 a month, which used to be a fortune back then. Yet, the dangers went far beyond the financial temptations. Our schedule was brutal. We'd work up to 18-hour shifts on the platform, crash for 3 hours in the chamber, before being thrust back into the ocean for another 14 to 18 hours of grueling work. At one point, we were so worn out we refused to dive. But the oil company threw down the gauntlet with our contractors, threatening to pull the contract if we didn't dive. We were a crew of 6 divers: Roy P. Lucas, Edwin Coward, Truls Helevik, Bjorn G. Everbergerson, who were all tasked with maintenance work deep beneath the rig, while I, along with another guy, William Crammond, were the dive tenders assisting them. To get a handle on our routine, first, you need to understand a thing called saturation diving. In simple terms, it's a special diving technique for going deep underwater without having to decompress after each dive. Basically, deep-sea divers often work several feet below the ocean. At those depths, the pressure makes normal air, which includes oxygen and nitrogen, become toxic. So, they add helium to the mix to make it breathable, and this blend is called heliox. The mixture gets adjusted depending on how deep the dive is. While heliox helps divers breathe and do their tasks under the crushing ocean pressure, things get tricky as they go deeper. The gases, oxygen, nitrogen, and helium, dissolve into their bloodstreams as the pressure increases. This dissolving is safe to a point, but the real problem starts when divers have to return to the surface. The nitrogen, which is now dissolved in the body, has to be released before the diver resurfaces, a process known as decompressing. If they come up too fast, the sudden drop in pressure causes nitrogen gas to form bubbles in the blood and tissues, leading to decompression sickness, also known as the bends, which can cause nausea, dizziness, severe joint pain, paralysis, and even death. Now, if a saturation diver went 650 feet underwater, for example, it'd take them a full 8 days to safely come back up. Because of how long this process takes, saturation divers often end up spending weeks deep below the surface. Or if they do resurface, they live in these specialized chambers where the pressure is kept just like it was at their working depth. That way, their bodies don't have to adjust to the pressure change all at once. In our case, we had this chamber with 2 pressurized subchambers, plus an escape capsule mounted on top of a lifeboat. There was also a trunk connecting it all to something called the diving bell. The diving bell would attach to the trunk, and then William and I, acting as diving tenders, operated it from the outside on the rig. The diving bell was like a mobile structure that let 2 of the divers go down into the ocean, do their maintenance work, and then come back up to the surface. The next team of 2 would then take their turn while the previous team rested in the chamber. Think of it like using your car to drive to work, doing your job, and then driving home to rest until the next day. At Byford, this whole process had to be repeated for 28 days straight. The divers were supposed to live, eat, and sleep in this pressurized environment to help their bodies adjust slowly to the pressure. This setup was designed to make the most out of the time and resources, making the switch between the high-pressure underwater work and the pressurized living quarters as smooth as possible. Outside the rig, every time a diving team came back from their shift, William and I had to clamp the bell onto the trunk, carefully balance the pressure between the bell and the living chambers, and then send the bell off to the life support team, so they'd prepare it for the next dive. This routine went on day after day, for 10 grueling, exhausting days. Even though we were running on empty, the contractors kept us working with barely any sleep. Then came the 11th day, November 5th, 1983. Everything seemed the same, except our fatigue was hitting an all-time high. Despite the overwhelming exhaustion, we pushed through our shift, which had now stretched past 12 hours. It was around 4 a.m. when Truls Helvik and Bjorn Bergersen wrapped up their maintenance work several feet beneath the ocean at 9 atmospheres of pressure. They ascended back to the surface, and as per routine, Cramond and I connected the diving bell to the chambers, following the SOPs to safely deposit Bjorn and Truls into Chamber 1. Chamber 2 was where Roy Lucas and Edwin Coward were resting, gearing up to take over the next shift, which was about to start shortly. But before that, we needed to disconnect the bell and send it off for preparation. Under normal conditions, this task was pretty straightforward, following 5 key steps. 1. First, one of the divers inside the chambers had to close the diving bell door, which was open to the trunk. 2. Next, we outside the chambers were meant to slightly increase the pressure in the diving bell to ensure the door was sealed tightly. 3. After that, Helvik would close Chamber 1's door, which was also open to the trunk, completing the chamber isolation process. 4. We would then slowly depressurize the trunk until it reached a pressure of 1 atm, the same as surface level, making it safe for the next phase. 5. Finally, we were supposed to open a clamp that would separate the diving bell from the chamber system. Cramond was in charge of this last step. Each step required the diver inside the chamber to radio back to us outside so we could proceed to the next stage. But that day, the environment outside was deafening heavy winds, massive waves, and the roar of machinery on the rig drowned out any commands. Still, the first 2 steps went off without a hitch, but before Helvik could close Chamber 1's door properly, a frenzy of confusion took over. Exhaustion, mixed up orders, and the deafening noise led to a critical error. The clamp that was supposed to remain sealed was opened prematurely. The identity of the person who opened the clamp remained a mystery. While Cramond, assigned to open the clamp, was blamed by everyone, I couldn't bring myself to believe he was at fault. He was already disoriented by the chaos and wouldn't have made such a critical mistake intentionally. Nevertheless, the error was made, so step 5, which involved opening the clamp, was executed instead of step 3, which was to close the chamber door. This blunder was catastrophic, and the repercussions were beyond anything anyone should have to endure. In less than a second, the chambers were instantly decompressed from 9 atmospheres to the ambient 1 atm. The pressurized air inside blasted out with such force that it jammed the interior trunk door and sent the bell crashing into us. To picture this chaos, think of a soda can shaken until it's ready to burst. Open it too quickly, and the soda erupts because the pressure inside is far greater than the pressure outside. That's exactly what happened here, but on a horrific scale. The chambers were like the inside of that soda can, and when the clamp was removed without securing the chamber door, it was as if someone yanked the tab off the can, but much more violently. The pressure difference ripped through the chambers, flinging Helvik off his feet and wreaking havoc on the deck. The flying diving bell, weighing a whopping 4 tons, struck Cramond first, then came barreling toward me. Inside the chambers, the violent decompression led to a swift, painless death for the 4 divers. Their blood boiled as dissolved nitrogen violently turned back to gas, causing fat to solidify in their arteries, veins, hearts, and livers. The explosive gas expansion scattered their blood and bodies around the chamber like ragdolls. Lucas Bergersen and Coward were left unrecognizable, but Helvik faced the most gruesome fate. Positioned closest to the connecting door, the pressure forced his body through a tiny, 24-inch crescent-shaped opening with a monstrous force of 25 tons. But being unable to fit through, his internal organs burst out of him while his spinal column, part of his windpipe, and some of his small intestine remained inside the bell. Outside the chamber, the impact from the heavy bell hit me like a freight train. When the blast went off, I was only about a meter away. Everything went pitch black for a few seconds. Then I was hit with a mix of unnerving warmth and excruciating pain. My lungs had collapsed, my neck was broken, and I had 3 fractures in my back. To make matters worse, my face was so messed up that they barely recognized me when they finally found me. And to top it off, I was pinned under the massive diving bell until the rescue team showed up. For a while, they thought I was dead, but somehow, I willed myself to move my fingers just to show them I was still alive. Eventually, both Cramond and I were spotted alive and airlifted to the medics. However, just moments into the flight, I watched in horror as he succumbed to his injuries right beside my bed, and whether he was the one who opened the clamp or not, that truth went with him.
Even though Martin Saunders walked away from the disaster, his injuries left him paralyzed for years. No one could pinpoint exactly what caused the accident, but initial reports laid the blame on Cramond for mishandling the trunk, which was something Martin repeatedly contested. A startling revelation came to light when it was found that the higher-ups at the oil company had supplied the Byford Dolphin divers with equipment that was a decade old. This outdated gear made their operations and communications a nightmare. On top of that, the pressure chamber system was antiquated, missing crucial fail-safes like an interlocking mechanism that would have prevented the trunk from being opened while the bell was still under pressure. This oversight led to new Norwegian regulations mandating interlock systems for all bell systems. What's more disturbing is that it took decades for the Norwegian government, which had oversight of the Byford Dolphin in 1983, to admit their role in the tragedy and compensate the victims' families. It wasn't until 2009 that they provided settlements to the families of all 6 victims, including Saunders. In 2016, the Byford Dolphin was finally decommissioned, closing the chapter on its turbulent career in the industry. Ironically, the recent tragedy of the OceanGate Titan echoes the Byford Dolphin disaster in a chillingly similar way. Both disasters were driven by relentless pressure, leading to catastrophic failures and heartbreaking loss of life. However, in the Byford Dolphin incident, the bodies were eventually recovered. But for those aboard the Titan, their remains are still lost to the abyss.